there is obviously a balance of learning how to pick your battles when it comes to
Right.
expressing yourself. There are people that aren't going to listen to you because they're so closed off and are actually not just oblivious to their emotions, but also don't want to know. They don't want to know how they feel or even how others feel. I learn how to tell who I can talk to and who I can broadcast my emotions to if I feel the need to. And also understand my own emotions without feeling the need to vocalize them to anyone. There's vocalizing your emotions and then learning to be okay with them and comfortable with them to the point where even if you're feeling down, you can take a deep breath, realize why you're feeling like that, and then learn to grow from that experience of being in that place, however long you found yourself to be in that place.
What's up, you beautiful beasts? I'm Katie. I'm on a mission to help humans become the best possible versions of themselves and to strive for overall health, mental health, emotional health, physical health, all of the healths, without ever having to step on a scale. I have had the privilege to talk to all kinds of different humans who've been through a plethora of experiences just being a human and existing. I believe that every single time somebody shares their story, at least one person listening will learn from it, be inspired by it, and maybe, just maybe, even change the entire direction of their life. These are the stories of humans unveiling their beautiful beast. Keep listening. This is the Unveiling the Beast podcast. All right, so how you doing today? Nice to meet you.
I'm doing good, and you?
I'm good. Um, you are an author.
I sure am.
Yeah. What kind of books do you write?
Currently doing fiction and horror. Um, Fantasies like my bread and butter that I'm trying
Mm-hmm.
to, focus on. But once in a while, I'll write something to kind of cleanse my own palate because fantasy takes a lot of not just creativity, but also doing everything from scratch because you're trying to literally create a whole new world. But when you write something based in not necessarily reality, but an echo of our reality, it's easier because then you can rely on natural elements that don't require fictitious manipulation.
Yeah.
So that's why it's a little exhausting to be a fantasy author and strictly do that, unless that's like all you want to do. But for me, it's like I can't do that. It's too exhausting to
Mm-hmm.
focus on one genre and one way of creating something. So that's why my upcoming book, Black Rose Cocoon, is basically just a crime thriller with some horror elements.
Nice. I've always been fascinated with people who can do that, just make up complete fantasy stories and make up
Mhm.
complete different worlds. Like I'll read a really good book and be like, that came from that person's head. That is amazing. So that's really cool. What got you into writing?
I mean, I've always wanted to work in the film industry as a writer, but that's such a competitive area of writing that it's easier for me to go back into that if I've established a solid platform and name for myself first. That way, if I wanted to get story credits as a screenwriter, it's easier to be seen and actually get, signed on to something.
Mm-hmm.
But when I switched to novel writing, I became more favorable towards that, not just because I could actually, hold in my hand the artwork that I created, but also if I'm able to gain popularity organically because people value not just story, but the fact that they can be entertained, something that's literally just ink and paper, that to me means that that story has more power than something you see on screen.
Mm.
Yeah, you can watch something on the screen as many times as you want, but you have to pay every time you do, unless you have that on hand at home. Where a book is forever. You pay
Yeah.
for it once, and there's no subscription for it. Um, and yeah, so I guess the other reason why I love writing books is that the physical act of implementing high value in emotion is far more powerful than seeing it on screen, because once it's on screen, it's it can be lost, especially if someone tries to recreate it in their own way. And therefore your power that you created in your I guess your small part in that project kind of goes into the background. Where something like this is forever.
Yeah.
This is just a cover, and it's what makes someone want to buy it. But it's what's on the inside that counts.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm able to get my readers to reread my books without me asking them to, that to me means that the story has such power that even if they can relate to it in a way that I can't, then that means that I did my job of relating to someone else without it being about my life or
Mm-hmm.
anything specific in it.
Yeah. I think one of the beauties of picking up a book and reading it is that you let your imagination kind of um I don't really know how to say it, like different people will see the whole story differently in their heads because of their imagination and the way that they're reading it. And like you said, when it becomes a movie, it's just one person's imagination of how they interpreted the book. So I think it's a beautiful thing with novels,
Yeah, I
especially.
mean, I've had readers tell me that, like, my series here, Boone and Jacques, um, it's actually mostly adult women that read my books. And they've told me that even though this was technically a YA series, they felt as adults that they could relate to certain scenes because it reminds them of their childhood, and also still learn about themselves in their current timeline.
Mm,
Um, and I found that really, touching, because I didn't have that intention. I don't even have like a age demographic for my target audience. It's more like I'm just writing what means to me, what has meaning to me. So
hmm
if my meaning translates to a different kind of meaning for someone else because they've lived a different life than I have, then I've succeeded in translating emotion in a way that's more humanistic as opposed to selfish.
mm,
Where it's because it's hard to use a creative outlet without completely disassociating yourself from it. It actually makes writing harder if you do that. But if you're able to strike a balance between enough distance that it's about creating new forms of life separate from your own, but also implementing parts of yourself so that you're not completely alien to your characters,
hmm
then you've found the rhythm that works for you in
yeah.
order to reach out to other people, and therefore making your writing not just powerful but also memorable for varying people.
Mm. Yeah, I was going to ask if any of your books have any parallels to your own life. And I would only ask that because I attempted to write a novel probably like 15 years ago, and it was basically a story from my life, but I changed the names of everybody and towns and places but it I was only able to write it because it was my own story, if that makes
Mm.
sense. So,
Um, Parallels, yes, in terms of I guess events or memories that I've
mhm,
implemented. And in fact, on my YouTube channel with the same name, AG Flitcher, I did a little series called Stories with AG Flitcher, where I talked about real life stories that inspired books or scenes. So, for example, um, what's one I can do this not too spoily? Okay. In book three of Boone and Jack, there's a scene where Boone is basically exhibiting teen angst, um, because he didn't have parents at that point of the story to guide him in through his frustration and changing mentality as he grows up. So he power fists a garbage dump because
Mm,
he didn't know how to release his anger in other way. And it just reminded me of certain people that I've been associated with in the past that didn't know how to handle their anger other than physicality. And because they're so traumatized for whatever past they have, that they don't know how to vocalize their pain without resorting to bitterness. And it's not that they're a bitter person, it's more like they've been damaged for so long and never actually took the time to um, really ask themselves, why am I always so angry? And am I too afraid to ask for help? So
mm,
that's what I tried to implement in these characters that essentially are on their own for developing their own mindset as they get older. Because without parental guidance or even peers, um, your way of evaluating yourself becomes darker and more tunnel visioned. And but there is a lighter side to that where if you don't have the guidance of other people, you can at least try to find one or two that will help you without I guess, aggressive judgment. They'll still
mm,
be honest with you, but it's out of love and support because they don't want to see you create self traps and therefore causing you to lean towards substance or um, being extremely triggered by everything that
mm,
upsets you. And you start to focus on all the little things that bug you, and then you create this fictitious idea that the circumstances are more difficult than they are. So that's the whole concept of friendship that I included
mm.
in Boone and Jack, because friends don't have the need to, I guess, protect you against your feelings or tell you what to do because they don't want to. They don't want to dictate how you go about your life.
Yeah.
And yes, parents have a very powerful ability to protect their children, but sometimes we as adults would rather talk to a friend because there's less, how can I put it, there's a bit of a distance between responsibility
Mm,
where yes, I'm not a parent and I can't speak to that relationship of parent versus child, but if you grew up without parents, especially if you're a foster child, um, the idea of having a life without parental guidance is heartbreaking because you wish someone was there to help you in a tough time.
yeah. Well, I wanted to switch gears just a little bit.
Yeah.
The Unveiling the Beast podcast is basically people telling their story or
Hmm.
stories from their life of like overcoming obstacles or anything like that that you so what is your story and or a story from your life that you think has been most impactful on shaping who you are?
I've always said the passing of my mother, but that has changed recently
Mm,
because I've learned to allow my life to grow around that scar, and it's been 9 years, so it's not like I'm still a mess. I'm becoming more emotionally clear, so
mm,
I'm much sturdier than I was before. What has really shaped me is my previous job at a zoo that I did for 6 years, where although it was a stable job and I learned a lot of skills at that place that will help me whenever I become a owner. The overall work environment felt really toxic,
Mm.
especially because the company had a hard time developing a steady structure to allow their employees to have a fair wage and not feel stressed out about everyone asking for a raise. So, although they allowed us to work semi-independently, and even when there's guidance from the head of departments, um, there was still this overall warped ideology of chain of command. So feeling alone in terms of going up the ladder and overworked and not knowing what else are you qualified for, it becomes harder, especially if you don't feel like you can make a career out of that place of work.
Mm.
So the reason why that shaped me so much is that I realized that, you can have a steady job and still not feel valued.
Mm.
And when you don't feel valued and you feel that you're going to start relying on complacency due to lack of motivation, then you start asking yourself, why am I allowing myself to think this way for so long? And therefore furthering myself from where I want to be. And then you just kind of snap out of it and realize, you know what, if I'm not being valued here, I'm going to find better value somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And by doing that, by valuing yourself more, especially if you're at a workplace where you are valued close to how you see yourself, then you see the possibility of going places where you want to go. So for me as a writer who wants to make a living out of that, I know that even though that's going to be a long journey, I would still want a secondary function for income to feel like it complements that passion. And that can be really hard to do if you're, you know, settling for misery because
Yeah.
you've kind of drained yourself involuntarily. Um, so rather than allow that to be the way things go and understand that my life is not predetermined, I decided to leave that place and having, you know, basically be in a place where there was not much safety
Mm-hmm.
procedure. And I actually, last summer, I could have died because I was using a metal cutting tool that flew at my face. But
Oh,
I
geez.
luckily, yeah, luckily I had good enough reflexes to jump out of the way, but it got my arm. So now I have a 4 to 6 inch scar on my bicep.
Mm.
Um, that was certainly terrifying. And
Yeah.
a real wake up call of, well then, it's a good thing I have health insurance, but I don't want to spend it on that. Um, but yeah, I'd say that job really changed me because when you do something where you're in an environment that is really working against you for where you want to go, um, you really start to question the pattern of your life. And not a lot of people do that. They don't they have so many responsibilities and expenses and all these, you know, survival elements that you have to implement. Um, they lose faith in the financial outcome of whatever passion that they have.
Mm.
And even if they don't want any kind of financial gain from that passion, it's more just a hobby, it can stretch them thin, especially if it becomes time consuming and things happen in life that make you drop it. And then if they stop doing that for a while, then they have to ask themselves, why was I doing that? What is it about that hobby or passion that I found appealing? And
Mm-hmm.
can I do a job that has that element of passion without me feeling like I'm obligated to put on a happy face?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah. I love what you said a few minutes ago. You said settling for, I already forgot the word you used, settling
Misery.
for misery. That hit me big. I know a lot of people who stay in their jobs because they're connected to the income and they're afraid that they won't be able to make that sort of income anywhere else and be happy at the same time. And so they just settle for, toxic situations or
Hmm.
just places where, like you said, where they don't feel valued. And
Hmm.
just, I love the way you worded that, settling for misery.
Yeah, I mean, my coworker and I that left basically at the same time in December. Um, I we had different realizations after we left. He didn't realize how bad it was after he left. And I kind of laughed at him. I'm like, I knew the whole time.
Yeah.
You, I'm so emotionally transparent and I read body language quite well that I know how I'm being perceived. And even if someone is too passive to say anything, I know what they're thinking. And it's not that I was settling for uh high amounts of bullshit. It's more
Hmm.
like I know that wherever I end up working, there is going to be bullshit everywhere. It's just a matter of being able to look past it and knowing that at least you're doing something that means something to you. And if you're permitted the space to work independently and or semi-independently, and you enjoy the work, it doesn't matter what the politics are. And if you know how to, you know, be yourself and um, have the voluntary need to work hard, then you're in the right place, regardless of whatever you disagree with how the employer's structure is,
Hmm.
because there is no such thing as a perfect, not just workplace, but also a perfect life. You know,
Yeah.
people think, oh, if I become rich, I won't have to worry about anything. It's like, yes, you will, because life will throw everything it can at you to see what you're gonna do.
Hmm.
Um, and I had to learn that the hard way, especially when I tried to plan everything. You can't plan everything. That's insane. It's like, okay, after my mom passed, I kept asking myself, where will I be starting now, and where will I be when my dad passes? Because when one parent passes, you still have the other to talk to,
Hmm.
if you feel so inclined. But when both pass and you have relatives that live elsewhere, and it's just you and whatever amount of siblings you have, it comes down to how do you piece yourself back together without the support of uh, a close loved one, and whatever you learned from them, whether it's something that you agree with or not, how will you define yourself as you get older without their presence, physically, that is.
Right.
Still believe in spiritual presence. Um, but I always just thought about that, where will I be in the future? And will I wait for tragedy to happen to make change, or will I act now?
I love that. I've never actually thought about what it would be like without my mom.
Mm,
Especially now because we're very close right now, and we weren't always close. We clashed quite a bit. Um,
yeah. And see,
but
that's
like,
that's why I wrote Boone and Jack, because I wanted to show people that with or without parents, how we go about our life, especially not knowing what our path is going to be, it's very circumstantial. It is nothing to do with how many grains of salt you take from what you ask people. It comes
mhm,
down to what you do, what your overall maturity does for you for your decision making. Even if you're in your 40s and 50s, it doesn't mean you're done growing. Whenever I go to the gym and I forget my headphones and I hear the middle-aged men bickering toward each other because they don't want to listen to each other, that to me is not just stubbornness, but unwilling to grow.
yeah,
And that's why I was wearing my headphones. I'm like, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear old men going, "Ah, screw you. I know what I'm doing." um, and that's why I don't really have a lot of male friends because I know that most men um see themselves not just as providers, but the overall male culture has dictated men as solid, and that's ridiculous to me because solid is such a umbrella term that you can't say I'm a solid guy because I can take care of myself and other people. I have the money, I have the masculine mentality. It's just like, oh, shut up. No one cares.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I've been seeing a lot of commercials for freaking pills for male confidence. And I'm like, is it the 80s again? Why are there so many like EDs, erectile dysfunction happening? Are men that stressed out that they can't physically function and they can't mentally just, share their pain with other people? Is that such a
Yeah.
weak trait to them to be emotionally open and to not feel judged by it? I don't get that. I've
Yeah.
my mom when she was alive, she used to say to me that I'm the most patient person she's ever met. I'm like, I'm not that patient. I just know to shut up. I mean, it took some time for me to develop that ability, but really it's just, realizing, you know, you can't control everything, and you certainly can't control yourself, um, unless someone stops you.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
I love that discussion too about the masculinity being don't ever feel, don't feel your emotions. It's like men are just as human as women.
yeah,
Like it, and being a former emotion suppressor, I guess. I shoved my emotions down for 38 years, and I just can't imagine like doing that and feeling like that's what I have to do,
hmm
if that makes sense.
yeah. I
So,
mean, whenever like I saw maybe a few months ago, um, it was like three guys on Instagram saying we need more masculine men. I'm like, but what does that mean? What the
mm-hmm.
hell does masculine men mean? And I remember making some argument with one guy. He's like, "Oh, so you're just gonna vomit all your emotions all day?" And I'm like, "What? What does that mean?" So I just sent him a laugh emoji. It was like, "Yeah, yeah, you're resorting to images because you're too much of a pussy." Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, "Okay, whatever."
Mm-hmm.
So, like, there is obviously a balance of learning how to pick your battles when it comes to
Right.
expressing yourself. There are people that aren't going to listen to you because they're so closed off and are actually not just oblivious to their emotions, but also don't want to know. They don't want to know how they feel or even how others feel. And that's why um I learn how to tell who I can talk to and who I can broadcast my emotions to if I feel the need to. And also understand my own emotions without feeling the need to vocalize them to anyone. There's vocalizing your emotions and then learning to be okay with them and comfortable with them to the point where even if you're feeling down, you can take a deep breath, realize why you're feeling like that, and then learn to grow from that experience of being in that place, however long you found yourself to be in that place.
Yeah, I love that. One of my most recent, I guess I can call it a challenge. I have a
Hmm
6.5-year-old boy, and he is learning how to, um, what's the word? He's learning how to deal with anger.
hmm
He just recently started having these huge outbursts of anger, and I'm a coach, and so I work with people and help them express emotions that they've been stuffing for years, right? And
Hmm.
so the last thing I want to do is be like, don't get angry. Because
Hmm.
I know that eventually if I say don't get angry, he's gonna learn that he can't feel anything. So
Hmm.
my biggest challenge these days is being like, it's okay to be angry. It's not okay to scream and throw your
Hmm.
PlayStation 5 controller across the house and break against the door. He didn't do that, but you know what I mean? Like it's
Hmm.
that borderline.
That's when you put gloves on him and say, go hit that punching bag.
Yes, and we have one too. So, basically the thing now, like he had a really bad outburst last night. I'm like, okay, new rule. When you get angry, because you will get angry, it's a normal human emotion, take a break. So I'm not telling him how necessarily
Hmm.
to express the anger, but I'm just like, take a break from whatever's making you angry.
Hmm.
So I just hope I'm doing the right thing.
Yes, you with kids, it's harder because I used to teach martial arts, and I'd have kids that were frustrated and didn't know how to release their anger. So, um, I can't tell them, take it out on your partner next to you, and
Right.
then I'd have parents getting mad at me. Um, but what I would ask them to do, if I know that they're gonna get angry, if I'm if I'm teaching everyone at the same time, obviously, and one kid is like this, like I'm not participating because I'm
Hmm.
too angry to do it, then I'll just come up to them and say, I can't tell you how to feel, but I can tell you to put your energy into whatever technique I'm asking you to do. And that's in your control. You have control of however you want to express that energy. I can't ask you to do it right away, but find a way as I'm basically like what I found when I was learning how to teach children is you have to discipline them, but you can't literally be breathing down their neck. You
Right.
basically give them the lesson that you're trying to give them and then walk away. Because then it's like you've established what you want and then you give them the space and don't pay attention to them because then they'll feel pressured and watched the whole time. And even though you are watching them, if you're watching them at a distance, they know that the energy that I'm doing as a leader is dispersed amongst the people. And
Hmm.
therefore it's not about them, it's just about the lesson for that kid in particular. And then even the well-behaved children will learn that lesson as well and then grow from it. So the difference between that and in adults is adults have not just a fully formed brain and a certain maturity, but you have to feel that they can independently piece themselves together, even if it's a much slower or different rate than you. So, for
Hmm.
example, recently at my current job, there is this coworker of mine that was just frustrated with certain things. And rather than ask her what's wrong, I literally just do my job. And then somehow she feels like she can talk to me. So the thing about adults being frustrated or any form of anger is they don't want to be told how to feel or what to do. They just
Hmm.
want someone to listen to them because probably when they were young, no one listened to them when they were angry. And it's actually a normal thing. Older parents didn't really listen to their children when they were having, I wouldn't say any emotion, more like a heightened emotion,
Hmm.
because being a parent is something that requires a lot of energy and a lot of patience. And some parents and in the previous generations didn't really have that kind of patience because they had to pay for the house and whatever bills and you know having their own relationships outside of the family. So when they are bagged from just dispensing their energy elsewhere, that's where the impatience come in. And of course, me as a single person that never had children, I can't relate to what that feels like, but
Hmm.
I can understand. as someone who was obviously once a child, the difference between being listened to and not wanting to say anything.
Mm,
So, it's hard to try and relate to everybody and to
yeah.
have everyone relate to you.
Yeah.
So that's why autonomy for how you conduct yourself is so tricky.
Yeah. I do love that you mentioned that it takes a lot of energy to be a parent. And one of the things that I've learned just from my clients is that a lot of their emotions were suppressed because the expression of their emotions made their parents uncomfortable. And
Hmm.
so like, a kid would throw a fit, get really angry and scream, and the parent would shut it down immediately because the parent was uncomfortable with the scream, but not necessarily the anger. Does that make sense?
No, that makes sense
Yeah.
because parents want to give their energy to their children, but sometimes it's difficult to do it when we're trying to reserve energy for ourselves.
Hmm.
And even if you're an adult with no children, if you have to go to an event or even just hanging out with people, you still have to put on some kind of face. You can't just sit there mute. I've actually seen videos, I think mostly Facebook and YouTube, um, where it's titled "I'm surrounded by people, but I'm still alone." Or still
Mm,
feel lonely. And it would be like a video of people at a restaurant or bar, and there's a guy drinking with all of his friends around him, but he just has this like very drained stare. And that's where, as adults, we have to realize that it's not that big a deal to seek help or even a different crowd of friends
yeah.
um, to make you feel not just like part of the group, but also want to be there,
Yeah.
present. Because we as adults, being present takes not just energy but courage. You know, we all have so many expenses to fulfill and so many worries that we don't know really how to handle, especially as the world becomes, convoluted. Um, that seeking help is not really even in our mindset because we don't have the energy to ask for it or
Yeah.
to even um, put that energy into something we want to do because the circumstances around us is requiring our energy to focus on that instead of what we want for ourselves.
Yeah. And oftentimes people think that if they are seeking help, that it means they're broken. And
Yeah,
that's,
so I mean, I've tried to help entrepreneurs when they said that, oh, I have to do this and this and this for my business, but I just don't want to. I just don't have the energy. And so sometimes I'll promote their business for free on TikTok because they know that's a powerful medium, and I do it voluntarily without telling them, and they appreciate it when they hear about it, and that because it what I would want all people to understand is that if you don't believe in yourself, find the people that believe in you.
mm,
Because we get to a point where we're trying to do something for so long that if no one is backing us up in terms of belief and support, and then we lose faith in ourselves, it kind of demeans how we see ourselves. And that's why changing your environment is so important. Even if you have a family, if you feel that your
mhm,
family could be in a better place, then either you can relocate or if you want to have a family meeting and discuss what can you do better to have a more fulfilling environment that everyone can benefit from, or if your child is old enough to leave, to give them the option to do that. Because as much as you love them and you want to keep them close, if they see opportunities somewhere else, then that's for their own benefit.
Yep. 100% agree. Well, I have two more questions for you.
Okay.
One is where can people find you and your books?
Okay. So for finding me, same handle for most of it. So for Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube is all AG Flitcher for the handle. But I have a podcast that I started about 6 weeks ago called Life as Stories with AG Flitcher, exclusively on Spotify. There are 6 episodes, one I just recorded today. What was it called? Motivation.
Mm.
Um, what else? I think that's pretty much it. Oh, well, to get specific, YouTube is for primarily my teaching services, in which I make videos once in a while for the craft of writing. Um, s- the podcast on Spotify is mainly me translating whatever I have on YouTube that can be seen as a podcast. And right now it's just me talking. So um, feel free to listen to my podcast. I'm enjoying doing it. Really, I'm just doing it for fun. I don't really care how many people listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
For books, you can get them on Amazon. All 5 books of Vernon and Jack as a Kindle and paperback. And early March is when Black Rose Cocoon will be out. Just a quick synopsis here. There's a killer in a fictitious town I called Halberton City. It's set in 1986, and rather than me doing a character origin story of this female killer, I did a 4 character rotation, meaning we get 4 different perspectives as the story rotates through these people. And to get specific, I have a detective, radio disc jockey, a hotel doorman, and a mother of a victim's mother. So I look forward for that in the first week or second week of March. I'm really excited about it. It's something that literally drained me physically and mentally because
Mm.
I was trying so hard to try to, you know, relate to as many people as possible. Because I've never seen that in a crime book where it's about how that killer affected society and families. It's
Yeah.
always about the thrill of the chase and who who cares about psychology? So, because when they try, some authors are good at that, like David Baldacci. He's good at that, but it's still the focus of the thrill of the hunt and the personal connection that detective has towards the killer. And I don't like that because it stays away from social and emotional impact that a killer can cause. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, Daryl Brooks from Georgia, Wisconsin. I don't know if you heard about that case. I think it was during the Macy's Day Parade.
Mm.
Um, he took a car and mowed down a bunch of people of all ages, and even reversed to make sure he got as many people as possible. Um, when I was looking for victim impact statements to implement that to my storytelling at the close to the end of the story,
Mm-hmm.
um, I was actually looking for videos that would make me uncomfortable so that I can implement that level of emotional value. So there was one in particular where a mom that was a victim of one of the girls that was killed. She was staring right into uh, the killer's eyes. And of course, the male killer was a narcissist and didn't see what he did wrong or didn't want to believe what he was being accused of.
Mm.
Um, well, of course, as a mom, went off on him for what he did to not just her daughter, but her as a parent. Um, it Because I'm not a parent, I still felt like that's what she was saying of you don't know what it's like to lose a child out of the blue and
Mm.
fuck you for doing that.
Right.
And when she was doing that, I was just like this in my chair and felt, chills all over my body. And so that whole chapter that I wrote for that, um, I made sure that I used at least 3 to 4 um, types of parents and even young girls, um, to show the impact of losing someone when you weren't ready for it.
Mm.
Whether it's an illness or an accident or murder, doesn't matter what it is. When you feel like part of you has been taken away from you, you have a choice to make of how do I react to this? Do I seek vengeance? Do I fall apart and not seek therapy? And that's what fascinated me about like the theme of how does someone deal with pain and tragedy? How do we all do that? Especially if I'm as a writer trying to echo a kind of pain that I can't relate to. How well can I do that? So that was
Yeah.
probably the most challenging chapter of that story. So sorry I went off so long on that.
No, that's
But,
okay. I got actually emotional when you were talking about that. So
well, see,
it's
that's
like,
why this book is going to be crazy because I was focusing mostly on mothers and daughters because that's
mm,
literally the killer's MO, I guess, if you want to call it that, or her target. Because male killers, it's so boring to me because male killers is purely out of control and the thrill of it, and it's
mm,
just a random body count. There's no real specificity as to why they do it. It's just what they like doing. Where for female killers, there's some kind of agenda, some opportunity that they're seeking, be it financial or vengeance. So I am excited to see what people think of that story.
I can't wait to read it. Awesome. And my last question I ask
Yeah.
everybody at the end of every episode, and that is if you had one piece of advice that you could give to the world, what would it be?
Learn to love yourself and believe in yourself more than not just others, but yourself as well. And what I mean by that is the part of you that doesn't believe or love yourself. It's there's there's confidence and self-hatred. And it's easy to hate yourself because falling for our own weaknesses is somehow more comforting because it doesn't require energy.
Hmm.
There's actually a release in just kind of like that. Literally, like I'm done. I don't have the energy to value myself. So really try to stay away from that. And if it's really hard to do by yourself, again, seek help, talk to people. And if the people in your life can't provide that for you, find someone else, move somewhere, or try therapy or something. Um, I'm leaving you with that because I can promote my books as much as I want, but that would defeat the purpose of my purpose of writing. My purpose of writing is to exemplify the human spirit. It's not to entertain you. The entertainment part is just part of it.
Right.
If I made it all about the entertainment, then be I would hate myself for doing that.
Mm.
But if I exemplify not just human emotion, but also the value of having heightened emotions, that is perfectly fine, then people will feel more comfortable expressing themselves loudly, with some control, obviously.
Hmm.
Um, but like there's a balance I want you to be able to find of I can express myself however I want, but there's a time and a place for doing that. So yeah.
Beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, AG Flitcher signing off. Until next time.